Hello everyone, and welcome to the Q-Man channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. Today, we're going to be discussing the 1994 film Pulp Fiction. The air in Los Angeles hangs thick with the scent of cheap cigarettes and existential dread. A familiar perfume for the characters who drift through Quentin Tarantino's sprawling tapestry of crime and conversation. We first encounter Vincent Vega, a man whose coolness borders on apathy, though beneath the surface one senses the quiet competency of a seasoned enforcer, perhaps someone who learned the hard lessons of loyalty and violence early on in the criminal underbelly. He's currently paired with Jules Winfield, whose religious epiphanies seem as sudden and shocking as the rounds he fires. Their morning task, retrieving a mysterious briefcase for their boss, Marcellus Wallace, is a masterclass in dramatic tension, punctuated by a philosophical debate about the subtleties of European fast food, a telling detail about their inner lives, contrasting the banal with the brutally swift application of force. The narrative splices swiftly, pulling us back to earlier moments. We see Vincent navigating a far more delicate assignment, escorting Marcellus's dangerously alluring wife, Mia Wallace. Mia, whose brief but unforgettable stint as a television actress, a fleeting brush with manufactured stardom, now makes her presence in the underworld that much more volatile. Vincent, aware of the cardinal rule against touching the boss's woman, moves with the nervous energy of someone who has seen colleagues disappear for far less transgression. Their evening, a trip to Jack Rabbit Slim's, a meticulously crafted nostalgic pastiche of 1950s Americana, becomes a stage for awkward dancing and near disaster when Mia accidentally overdoses on heroin, mistaking it for cocaine. Vincent's frantic drive to Marcellus's personal doctor, an almost farcical sequence demanding an adrenaline shot directly into the heart, illustrates the razor's edge these people walk. One wrong move and the consequences are immediate and terminal. Juxtaposed with these dangerous errands is the story of Butch Coolidge, a washed-up boxer whose career was effectively bought and sold by Marcellus Wallace. Butch, haunted by the memory of his father's gold watch, a symbol of generational trauma and survival passed down through unimaginable hardship, decides to betray the fix. He wins the fight but escapes with the payoff, setting in motion a chain of events that collide violently with the lives of Vincent and Marcellus. His frantic escape on a motorcycle, borrowing a distinctive chopper from an acquaintance, highlights the sheer chaos of trying to outrun fate in this city. The lives converge unexpectedly in a pawn shop. Butch, needing to retrieve the heirloom watch, runs directly into Vincent Vega, who is purchasing a new wardrobe. The resulting, shockingly casual gunfight ends Vincent's narrative arc abruptly, a stark reminder of the unpredictability of this world. Butch, in a moment of supreme, almost mythic irony, accidentally runs over Marcellus Wallace while fleeing the scene. Both men, injured and terrified, seek refuge in the dimly lit, fetid interior of a specialized antique shop, only to fall into the hands of Maynard, a sadistic character whose predilections lead to a truly nightmarish scenario in the basement. Butch, summoning the raw, fighting instinct that made him a boxer, rescues Marcellus, and in a spontaneous display of loyalty, born from shared terror, they agree to let each other go, a truce sealed in the shadow of profound depravity. The timeline loops back once more to the opening scene, but now we see the aftermath of Jules's sudden spiritual awakening during the botched robbery attempt earlier that morning. Jules, convinced that the miraculous survival of himself and Vincent from a barrage of bullets was divine intervention, the Ezekiel 25:17 passage recited not as a threat, but as a prophecy fulfilled, decides to leave the life. Vincent, ever the pragmatist, remains skeptical. They encounter the surviving robber, Pumpkin, now calling himself Ringo, who attempts to hold them up again. Jules, having already committed to his change of heart, calmly relinquishes the briefcase, effectively walking away from the material stakes of their profession. He leaves Ringo and his partner with a small amount of money, a symbolic gesture of casting off the darkness. The film closes as Vincent, having survived the night, drives Jules to a diner where they share a simple breakfast, coffee and toast. Jules departs to begin his new path, leaving Vincent alone, a man still deeply embedded in the machinery of Marcellus's empire, yet perhaps subtly altered by the whirlwind of violence, love triangles, and existential crises he has just navigated. It's a messy ending, characteristic of the film's design. Threads are tied, but the larger tapestry remains frayed, inviting the audience to endlessly re-examine the connections between these beautifully flawed souls. The diner scene, simple as it appears, functions as a fragile punctuation mark on a night defined by excess and near-death experiences. Vincent Vega, chewing his toast with a weary indifference that has become his signature pose, watches Jules embrace a new, uncertain future. Vincent, a man molded by the very structure he serves, the loyalty to Marcellus Wallace defining his every move, from accepting the most bizarre requests to maintaining a facade of unflappable cool, cannot easily shed the skin of the professional killer. He seems less capable of the grand epiphany Jules experienced. For Vincent, life remains a series of procedures, albeit ones that occasionally involve heart injections or clandestine meetings. His past, likely filled with the kind of necessary brutalities that earn one respect in this world, has left him fundamentally tethered to the cycle. Consider Mia Wallace again, emerging from the near-fatal overdose. Her allure isn't just physical, it's the potent cocktail of celebrity residue, and a profound, almost careless boredom that makes her irresistible to men like Vincent. She embodies the beautiful danger inherent in Marcellus's possession. When Vincent saves her, he isn't just saving a life. He's managing a volatile asset, understanding that the subsequent terror, the thought of Marcellus's retribution, is far more debilitating than the near tragedy itself. That adrenaline shot sequence, that desperate, clumsy attempt to resuscitate glamour and status, is pure Tarantino theater. High stakes filtered through utterly absurd practical measures. And Butch Coolidge, his dedication to that tarnished gold watch, speaks volumes about the lineage of survival he carries. The watch isn't just jewelry, it's the tangible weight of his father's sacrifice in a Japanese prison camp. When Butch wins the fight but walks away with the cash, he's not just committing theft. He's rejecting the entire system of controlled outcomes that Marcellus represents. He's fighting for self-determination, however brief that freedom lasts. His accidental involvement with Marcellus after the motorcycle ride, ending in that subterranean horror show involving Maynard and Zed, strips both men down to their most primal selves. In that basement, stripped of their usual power dynamics, Marcellus the boss, Butch the subject, they are merely two terrified men facing unspeakable violation. Butch's decision to save Marcellus isn't a sudden moral awakening. It's the recognition that shared vulnerability in the face of absolute evil creates a temporary, binding debt. It's a transactional mercy, fitting perfectly within this universe where everything is ultimately traded. Jules, conversely, has achieved a transcendent break. His performance of Ezekiel 25:17 earlier in the film was a well-rehearsed intimidation tactic, a calculated piece of theatre designed to induce compliance through fear of divine retribution. But when the bullets miraculously fail to connect, the recitation transforms. It becomes an authentic prophecy witnessed firsthand. His refusal to engage Pumpkin in the diner robbery is the most definitive action in the entire film, a conscious rejection of violence as a means to an end. He leaves the money, leaving the power imbalance unresolved for Pumpkin, but crucially, resolving his own spiritual contract. Vincent drives him, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of a flicker of curiosity about what lies beyond the trenchcoat and the .45 caliber certainty. The parting in the early morning light suggests that while some characters are destined to remain in the perpetual twilight of their careers, others manage, however briefly, to step into the blinding, unforgiving clarity of the day. The lingering taste of lukewarm coffee in that 24-hour diner is the closest thing Jules Winfield ever gets to a true moment of peace. He walks away from the booth and into the blinding Los Angeles dawn, shedding the heavy cloak of his identity as Marcellus Wallace's most philosophical hitman. Jules, who always managed to quote scripture with the same smooth delivery he used when ordering a big Kahuna burger, now finds the words have finally taken root, not just in his mouth, but in his soul. It's a hard transition for a man whose entire professional life was predicated on the absolute finality of death. Suddenly, the rules have changed, and the ledger must be balanced differently. He carries the weight of his previous intentions, the dark shadow of the man who was ready to execute Pumpkin moments before, but now steps forward with a strange lightness. A man suddenly unburdened by the necessity of ultimate consequence. Vincent Vega remains seated, the silent observer of Jules's departure. Vincent, forever the professional middle manager of mayhem, is the character most resistant to change. His career trajectory has been less about rising to the top and more about maintaining a precarious, highly paid equilibrium within Marcellus's immediate orbit. He embodies a kind of deadpan professionalism. Even when discussing the subtle cultural differences between the US and Europe, or when faced with the near death of Mia, his demeanor rarely cracks beyond that subtle, world-weary frown. He is the ultimate survivor in the transactional sense, the one who knows how to follow orders to the letter, even when those orders involve potential suicide missions. His driving Jules to the diner feels less like friendship and more like the completion of one final, necessary administrative task before returning to the office. He has witnessed the miracle, but he lacks the framework to internalize it, preferring the concrete reality of the gun in his hand to the abstract promise of salvation. Mia Wallace, post-revival, is perhaps the most complex emotional residue of the night. She returns to Marcellus's control, not as a chastened wife, but as a near mythological figure who cheated death, further solidifying her untouchable status. The adrenaline shot wasn't just a medical procedure, it was a dramatic reset button, allowing her to return to her high-wire act with Marcellus, her dangerous flirtations momentarily excused by the sheer scale of the panic she induced. She is the embodiment of high-risk glamour, a muse whose presence simultaneously inspires loyalty and ensures constant, underlying terror among Marcellus's associates. Butch Coolidge's journey offers the starkest contrast. His redemption is purely practical. He escapes the pawnshop basement not through divine intervention, but through the effective application of a baseball bat against a perverse predator. His saving of Marcellus is a pragmatic debt repayment. In the face of extreme degradation, he chooses to side with the established power structure over falling victim to a new, unknown horror. Butch returns to his stolen motorcycle, clutching the gold watch, symbolizing a successful heist against fate itself. He has managed to extract value, his life and his heirloom, from the very man who tried to control him, making his escape a triumph of pure, self-interested opportunism rather than moral awakening. Ultimately, the film dissolves back into its disparate threads, leaving Vincent Vega as the lonely anchor. He is the one still waiting for the next call, the one whose narrative arc demands continuation within the bloody loop. The fleeting connections, Jules's sudden faith, Butch's narrow escape, the memory of Mia's near-fatal kiss, are just momentary static interrupting the continuous broadcast of Los Angeles crime. Vincent remains in the car, perhaps contemplating the difference between a clean kill and a messy overdose, forever suspended between the philosophical musings of his partner and the blunt reality of his employer's demands. The early morning light, however, does not signify a true dawn for Vincent. He pulls away from the curb, where Jules's silhouette fades, an almost biblical departure, leaving Vincent alone in the driver's seat, the smell of stale gasoline and lingering fear clinging to the upholstery. For Vincent, the world snaps immediately back into its familiar, sharply defined parameters: obedience, transaction, and silence. He drives not towards a new life, but towards the next assignment, the next whispered instruction from Marcellus. He is an instrument, beautifully tuned and utterly dependable, but incapable of self-direction. His face perpetually set in a mask of studied nonchalance, a technique honed over years of avoiding eye contact that might betray fear or dissent, absorbs the morning glare without flinching. It is precisely this unyielding conformity that makes Vincent such a compelling cipher. Unlike Jules, who can dramatically cast off his old life like a heavy coat, Vincent is defined by the uniform he wears, even when that uniform is simply an expensive suit over a concealed weapon. One imagines his apartment is as meticulously ordered as his execution of tasks. Clean surfaces, no clutter, nothing that suggests an inner life that contradicts the efficient killer Marcellus employs. His memories of the previous night, the jarring slap of Mia's near death, the absurdness of the adrenaline-fueled rescue, are likely already being filed away as operational hazards, anecdotes for a later, drunken retelling rather than existential threats. He lacks the capacity for the profound shift Jules experienced. For Vincent, the world remains exactly as it appeared at the start of the evening: dangerous, hierarchical, and utterly without spiritual safety nets. His movements now are purely habituated. He might head back to Marcellus's compound, waiting for the next crisis that requires his particular brand of detached competence. Perhaps he will stop to purchase a truly excellent, uncontroversial breakfast. Something without European pretension, something solid and American, before reporting in. The chaos of the night, the brushes with death experienced by those around him, only serves to underscore his own professional stability. He is the constant against which the others, the saved, the converted, the betrayed, are measured. Vincent Vega remains the ultimate product of the underworld system, a man so deeply integrated into the machinery of crime that removing him would require dismantling the entire operation. He is the quiet aftermath, the person left holding the keys when the main event has dramatically concluded, forever waiting for the next narrative thread to snag him into its volatile weave. Vincent's drive is punctuated by the city waking up, the mundane sounds of traffic and construction an unnerving counterpoint to the violent surrealism he just navigated. He adjusts his rearview mirror, checking not for police, but for any lingering trace of the night's absurdity clinging to his appearance. The image reflected back is that of a man who has seen the abyss and merely shrugged. This is the core of his appeal and his tragedy. He functions flawlessly within chaos. There is no room for reflection when efficiency is the highest virtue. If Marcellus Wallace requires a favor, be it retrieving a briefcase or administering emergency medical procedures to his wife, Vincent executes with the same level of professionalism, the emotional investment remaining strictly zero. It's possible that Vincent harbors a faint, professional curiosity about Jules's sudden conversion. He respects Jules's skill, perhaps even envies his sudden ability to walk away, but he cannot emulate it. For Vincent, meaning is derived solely from competence in his designated role. To stop being the fixer, the reliable heavy, would be to cease existing entirely. He understands the rules of their universe, rules about territory, loyalty, and silence better than anyone, and those rules explicitly forbid introspection that leads to insubordination. Jules's path, while admirable in its boldness, is structurally unsound in Vincent's pragmatic view. It leaves one exposed and vulnerable, relying on the fickle nature of divine grace rather than the reliable stopping power of a well-maintained firearm. As Vincent navigates the morning traffic, the memory of Mia Wallace is particularly vivid, not as a romantic entanglement he narrowly avoided, but as a logistical near failure. He recalls the slick panic of holding that syringe, the sheer absurdity of requiring a specialist doctor, a contact of Marcellus's naturally, to inject adrenaline into a movie star's heart in a cheap motel. That sequence reveals Marcellus's kingdom. Impenetrable wealth that can summon specialized medical intervention in minutes, yet ultimately unable to insulate its inhabitants from fundamental human error or chemical dependency. Vincent likely feels a professional irritation that Mia's behavior nearly compromised his standing rather than genuine concern for her life. The silence in the car, now that Jules is gone, feels vast and expectant. Vincent doesn't feel relief. He feels the weight of increased responsibility. He is now the primary asset, the last man standing from that particular foray into the city's underbelly. He has survived not through enlightenment or clever betrayal, like Butch, but through disciplined adherence to the script, even when the script took unexpected detours into pawnshop basements and near-fatal overdoses. He is the ultimate company man, and the sun rising over Los Angeles simply means the window for paperwork is closing, and the time for the next briefing is fast approaching. His is a future defined not by choice, but by the next phone call from Marcellus Wallace. Vincent's fingers drum a barely perceptible rhythm on the steering wheel, a low-level tick that betrays the tautness beneath his relaxed posture. He catches sight of a tabloid headline screaming about some forgotten celebrity scandal, and a ghost of a smile touches his lips, the only reaction he permits himself. These petty dramas of fame are the world Mia and the aspiring starlets inhabit, a world that orbits the brutal gravity of Marcellus. Vincent has always understood that celebrity in their ecosystem is just another form of leverage, another asset to be managed or contained. His role is to ensure that asset remains functional, or, if necessary, disposed of cleanly. The internal monologue, if one can call it that, is less a narrative and more a series of checklists. Did he leave fingerprints at the apartment after the earlier incident? Was the weapon from the robbery properly disposed of? These are the measurable quantities of his existence. The philosophical weight of Jules's conversion simply doesn't translate into actionable steps. How does one quantify grace? How does one report a spiritual awakening on an expense report? Vincent simply can't process data that doesn't possess a clear, immediate danger rating. When he thinks of Butch Coolidge, Vincent feels a flicker of professional disdain mixed with a grudging respect for raw, primal survival instinct. Butch operated outside the system, reacting emotionally, driven by a sentimental object, that damned watch. That kind of impulse is a liability. Vincent knows that any plan built on sentiment is destined to collapse under the weight of practical execution. Butch won his immediate battle, yes, but by cutting ties entirely. Vincent, by remaining tied to Marcellus, however tenuously, ensures his own continued, albeit controlled, relevance. He views Butch's escape as a temporary reprieve, believing that true freedom from Marcellus's long reach is an illusion for anyone who has ever crossed him. His destination is likely Marcellus's home or office, a place where the air feels heavier, charged with unspoken threats and the scent of expensive cologne. Vincent anticipates the debriefing, the almost imperceptible narrowing of Marcellus's eyes that will signify approval or displeasure. He needs that feedback loop. It validates his existence. He doesn't crave recognition, only functional continuity. The silence in the car is not peaceful. It is merely the temporary lull before the next inevitable surge of required violence. Vincent Vega is an artifact of the life he leads, perfectly preserved by his own lack of imagination regarding alternatives. He drives on, the only man truly prepared to face whatever the next scene demands, because for him, the next scene is always the same, just with different props and a revised body count. The heavy, ornate door of Marcellus Wallace's residence swings inward, not with a welcoming gesture, but with the implied weight of obligation. Vincent steps across the threshold, immediately shedding the last vestiges of his road-weary exterior. The transition is instant. The slightly slumped shoulders straighten. The bored expression firms into one of professional alertness. He is now back on the clock, and in Marcellus's world, time moves only at the pleasure of the boss. The interior is a study in oppressive luxury, dark wood and muted tones designed to absorb sound and emotion, perfect for maintaining secrets. Marcellus, sitting behind a massive desk that functions more like a throne, is studying something on a monitor, his focus absolute. He doesn't look up immediately. This deliberate delay is a calculated power play, forcing Vincent to stand in silence, absorbing the atmosphere of absolute authority. Vincent doesn't fidget. He has long since mastered the art of waiting without appearing to wait, his stillness a performance in itself. He is acutely aware that the brief, miraculous survival of Jules and the messy escape of Butch are now data points Marcellus is processing, perhaps already factoring into future organizational adjustments. When Marcellus finally raises his eyes, there is no discernible anger regarding the near disasters. Instead, there is a clinical assessment. He acknowledges Vincent's competence in handling the Mia situation, the crisis averted, the asset stabilized, with a simple, almost bored nod. But the topic of Jules is broached next, less a concern about his partner's well-being and more an issue of operational security. Jules's sudden piety is viewed as a potential security flaw, a deviation that introduces unpredictability where Marcellus demands rigid control. Vincent is expected to offer an explanation, a dissection of Jules's mental state. Yet Vincent can only relay the bare facts of the diner conversation. Jules quit. He left the money. Marcellus digests this information, perhaps viewing Jules's departure as a necessary, if inconvenient, pruning of dead weight. Vincent, observing this cold calculation, understands his own position more clearly. He is the one who stays because he never asks why. He simply performs the required action. Marcellus then outlines the next task, something that requires Vincent's particular blend of discretion and lethality. Something that doesn't involve celestial intervention or theatrical confrontations, but cold, hard business. It's a task whispered low, drawing Vincent closer, ensuring that whatever follows remains confined within the immediate space between the two men. Vincent nods once, absorbing the new parameters of his existence. The cycle recommencing without a missed beat. The ordinary weight of his deadly occupation settling back onto his shoulders as the door clicks shut behind him, leaving the residue of fear outside. Vincent leaves Marcellus's study feeling the familiar cold satisfaction of having met expectations without exceeding them. The sweet spot of high-level employment in this shadow economy. He is unremarkable in his adherence to procedure, and that is his superpower. As he walks through the sprawling silent house, he glances momentarily at a piece of contemporary art on the wall, a jarring splash of color that seems entirely out of place amidst the heavy traditional decor. It mirrors the jarring nature of his own life. Moments of surreal beauty or horror, punctuated by long stretches of dull readiness. His mind is already moving ahead to the logistics of the new assignment. This new task, whatever its nature, will require preparation, perhaps a trip to the armory or a quiet reconnaissance drive through unfamiliar territory. He thinks briefly of the briefcase they retrieved that morning, still locked away in a secure location, its contents, the glowing, unknowable MacGuffin, now secondary to the immediate needs of the organization. The briefcase served its purpose. It brought Jules to his precipice and Vincent through another day. It was a plot device made tangible, and now it waits patiently for its next narrative role. The lack of emotional fallout from Jules's exit surprises him only briefly. In this line of work, partnerships are temporary arrangements sealed by shared proximity to danger, not genuine affection. Vincent doesn't feel lonely. He feels unencumbered. He can now focus entirely on the mission parameters without the need to navigate Jules's sudden spiritual anxiety. That anxiety, Vincent knows, is contagious, and he is inoculated against it. He finds the idea of faith inefficient. Marcellus's influence is tangible, predictable, and far more reliable than any unseen deity. As he prepares to leave the premises, heading out into the midday sun, which feels almost offensively cheerful after the night's darkness, Vincent performs a final, reflexive check of his pockets. Keys, wallet, phone, and a small, discreet weapon. He is a man who trusts only what he can physically manipulate or control. The memories of Butch Coolidge, the sheer blind luck of that man's survival, serve only to reinforce Vincent's belief in meticulous planning over chaotic reaction. Butch was lucky. Vincent is prepared. Driving away, Vincent steers clear of the familiar haunts. He won't go near the diner where Jules is starting his new chapter, nor the general vicinity of the pawn shop. He is a creature of defined boundaries now, insulated by the new orders. The city stretches out before him, a vast, indifferent landscape where millions are engaged in meaningless commerce, entirely unaware of the strange, violent calculus that dictates the movements of men like Vincent Vega. He accelerates smoothly, merging into the traffic flow, just another expensive car driven by a quiet, competent man, perfectly slotted back into the machine, waiting for the next pull of the narrative lever. Vincent's entry back into the anonymity of daytime Los Angeles traffic is seamless. He operates on instinct now, a highly trained organism responding to environmental stimuli, his internal mechanisms humming along as they always have. The new assignment Marcellus provided feels suitably opaque. It requires travel, perhaps a trip across state lines, allowing Vincent to fully inhabit the role of the detached operative, the ghost moving through established routes. He prefers these missions where the target is clear and the justification is solely Marcellus's will, as it simplifies the moral calculus to zero. He considers the implications of Marcellus's reaction to Jules. The boss hadn't expressed anger. Anger is messy, an uncontrolled expenditure of energy. Marcellus displayed only efficiency. Jules was a variable that introduced too much risk, and thus he was neutralized from the roster. Vincent understands this cold economy deeply. He reflects that his own strength lies precisely in his emotional barrenness regarding the job. He could never be Jules, prone to dramatic reinterpretation of events, nor could he ever be Butch, driven by sentimental anchors. Vincent is tethered only to the next payroll, the next instruction. The fleeting image of Mia surfaces again, but only in the context of future risk assessment. Her overdose wasn't a tragedy. It was a liability that required rapid, expensive containment. Vincent remembers the look in her eyes just before he administered the shot, a strange mix of defiance and sheer terror. He suspects Marcellus knows exactly how close they all tread to the edge, and that's why he keeps them close. They are all walking proof of his control. Any man who survives such an incident, Vincent reasons, owes Marcellus a debt that supersedes mere employment. He stops briefly at a high-end convenience store, not for a celebratory meal, but for necessary supplies: water, high-quality coffee grounds, and perhaps a new magazine to pass the inevitable long waits on stakeouts. The clerk greets him with the rote politeness afforded to any affluent, silent customer. Vincent pays in cash, never using traceable credit. Every interaction is a controlled transaction, a minimization of potential exposure. He sees the world around him, the tourists, the office workers rushing back to their legitimate concerns, as inhabitants of an entirely different reality, one where consequences are bureaucratic and rarely fatal. As he settles back into the drive, the city noise seems muted, filtered through the soundproofing of his expensive sedan. The truth is, Vincent doesn't seek escape. He seeks structure. Jules is free, a concept Vincent finds terrifyingly abstract. Vincent craves the concrete reality of the next target, the next closed door behind which his skills will be required. He is the eternal second act, the reliable enforcer who cleans up the philosophical messes left behind by others. He drives towards the horizon of his next duty, entirely content in the knowledge that for him, The cycle has not broken. It has merely recalibrated to a higher gear. The highway stretches out before Vincent, a ribbon of asphalt leading away from the immediate claustrophobic pressure cooker of downtown Los Angeles. He settles into the rhythm of the road, the drone of the engine a monotonous companion to his thoughts. The new assignment, whatever it entails, demands a certain level of sustained immersion, a shedding of personal identity in favor of the mission profile. This is where Vincent excels. He becomes the vessel for Marcellus's will, his own preferences utterly submerged. He imagines the destination, perhaps a remote location, a meeting in a different state where the local laws are less inconvenient, or maybe a delicate piece of retrieval that requires absolute silence. He finds himself mentally reviewing the conversation with Marcellus regarding Jules. It wasn't the loss of a partner that registered, but the sudden failure of a predictable component. Jules had become erratic, injecting an element of theological speculation into the business of contract killing. Vincent understood that Marcellus tolerated eccentricity only when it generated profit or power. Piety, divorced from threat, was simply inefficient noise. Vincent registers that by not questioning, by simply accepting the next directive without philosophical pause, he has, ironically, guaranteed his longevity where Jules's moral clarity guaranteed his exit. In Marcellus's eyes, Vincent is the perfectly tempered blade, sharp, reliable, and unburdened by existential angst. The events involving Butch Coolidge still carry a faint, irritating echo of untidiness. Butch was a wild card, driven by a tangible, sentimental object, that gold watch. Vincent has always viewed sentimentality as poor structural engineering. It introduces weak points into an otherwise robust system. Butch's escape, however messy, confirms a hard truth. Sometimes brute, chaotic self-preservation, divorced from allegiance, manages to circumvent even Marcellus's elaborate control mechanisms. But Vincent dismisses it as statistical anomaly, a fluke of timing that resulted in Marcellus being momentarily vulnerable in the presence of a known adversary. It's a scenario Vincent is trained to prevent, not emulate. As the hours pass and the landscape shifts from urban sprawl to arid scrubland, Vincent finds a temporary peace in the sheer physicality of the drive. He is a man who prefers tangible problems, a lock to pick, a distance to cover, a person to neutralize. Abstract concepts like redemption or fate are reserved for late-night television, not the serious business of maintaining one's existence in this world. He grips the steering wheel tighter, feeling the connection to the machine, the only truly reliable interaction he has had all night that didn't involve a firearm or a potential murder charge. He is heading deeper into the structured quiet where his particular set of skills is most highly valued, shedding the noise of revelation for the clarity of command. The road rolls out beneath Vincent's tires, a landscape slowly giving way to the vast, indifferent emptiness that Marcellus often prefers for delicate operations. This journey into the unknown, the new assignment, is a return to comfort, a deep dive into the familiar routine of controlled isolation. He allows himself a brief, almost subliminal thought about the fuel gauge. Precision in all things, even the mundane necessities of travel, prevents catastrophic delays. He is moving away from the immediate aftermath, letting the echoes of Jules's conversion and the sordid chaos of the pawn shop fade into the background noise of the interstate. He notices a small, independent gas station ahead, a place utterly lacking in the corporate polish he usually frequents. It's a risk, but a calculated one. An opportunity to observe local character and blend momentarily into the background static of everyday life. As he pulls up to the pump, he catches his own reflection in the grimy window of the station's small office. The expensive suit slightly rumpled, the eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. He looks like a man who has simply had a very long business trip, an appearance he cultivates with meticulous care. Inside, the clerk is young, perhaps a college student working a summer job, utterly unaware of the proximity to the world Vincent inhabits. Vincent buys a pre-packaged sandwich, unremarkable, easily discarded, and a lukewarm soda. He doesn't engage in small talk. The transactional nature of the purchase is brief and final. He pays with a crisp 20, watching the clerk's hands carefully as the change is counted out. This low-stakes observation is his version of relaxation, a way to keep the perceptual apparatus finely tuned without engaging in actual risk. The silence in the car upon resuming the drive is now less expectant and more resolute. He has successfully purged the immediate environment of complications. Jules is gone. Butch is a memory of chaos best avoided, and Mia is Marcellus's problem again. Vincent is clean, mobile, and fully operational. He allows himself a moment to appreciate the simplicity of his current objective. Follow the map, execute the order, return. There is a profound, almost ascetic purity to this existence. Unlike Jules, who needed a religious revelation to find an exit, Vincent finds his escape in the perfect execution of his role, an ultimate form of surrender to function. He takes a bite of the bland sandwich. It tastes like nothing, which is precisely what he needs. It's a palate cleanser before the next main course of violence. He knows that when he completes this assignment, Marcellus will offer him a nod, perhaps a rare, almost imperceptible word of praise. That approval, transactional and conditional as it is the only affirmation Vincent requires. He is not seeking meaning. He is maintaining momentum, driving ever onward into the professional twilight that has become his only discernible horizon. The scrubland begins to consume the horizon, the highway becoming a solitary vein running through a landscape that seems determined to forget human intrusion. Vincent pushes the accelerator, seeking the anonymity that distance provides. He doesn't listen to the radio. Any external soundtrack would dilute the sharp internal focus required for the road ahead. His mind is now a blank slate, scrubbed clean by the previous night's intensity and the cold clarity of Marcellus's directive. He is an empty vessel ready to be filled with the next necessity. The fatigue is a dull, constant pressure behind his eyes, but it's a familiar companion, the residue of commitment. He views sleep not as a restorative balm, but as a necessary system reboot, something to be scheduled around operational requirements. He notices a faint, almost invisible scratch on the pristine leather of the passenger seat, an imperfection caused by Mia's purse during the frantic drive to the hospital. He runs a gloved finger over it, not in anger, but in clinical observation of wear and tear. Everything, even the finest details, eventually degrades under the pressure of their lives. Vincent has always understood that Marcellus Wallace doesn't deal in friendships, only utilities. Jules had ceased to be a utility. His sudden moralizing was an unpredictable drag on efficiency. Vincent, however, remains the epitome of reliability. He suspects Marcellus views him with a kind of detached pride, the way a master mechanic regards a perfectly calibrated engine that never stalls, never questions the oil pressure, and always starts on the first turn of the key. This acceptance is the closest Vincent gets to affection. He contemplates the nature of their work, the absurdity juxtaposed with the lethality. One minute you're discussing European fast food, the next you're dealing with a man wearing a gimp suit. Vincent has learned to treat both scenarios with equal, detached seriousness. Humor for him is purely situational, a brief release valve before snapping back to protocol. He never laughs with people. He only occasionally observes the absurdity of others' laughter. As the sun climbs higher, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows, Vincent adjusts the air conditioning, another small, controllable element in a world otherwise dominated by uncontrollable variables. He is deliberately avoiding introspection. To look too closely at the life he leads is to invite the same terrifying questions that paralyzed Jules. Vincent Vega's survival mechanism is denial through relentless action. He doesn't need faith, he needs distance, speed, and a clear objective. He merges onto a less traveled route, the landscape turning desolate, preparing himself to meet the silence of his next task with the same blank, unflappable competence that defined his departure from the diner curb. He is the shadow ensuring that when the bright lights of the narrative shift again, he will be exactly where Marcellus expects him to be. Ready. The transition to the lesser traveled road feels less like a strategic move and more like a natural descent into the appropriate atmosphere for his business. The asphalt here is cracked, the roadside littered with the detritus of forgotten journeys, shattered glass, discarded tires, the bleached bones of small animals. This desolation suits Vincent. It offers no witnesses, no unexpected philosophical interruptions. He pulls down the visor against the relentless, high-angle glare of the midday sun, shielding his eyes from a light that feels too honest for the work he undertakes. He drums his fingers again, this time unconsciously tapping out a steady military rhythm against the center console. It's a habit from training, a physical manifestation of mental discipline. He mentally runs through the standard operating procedures for hostile entry, a sterile exercise designed to overwrite any lingering images of the chaos he just fled. Breach point, weapon ready, assess threat level, prioritize neutralization. These steps are his liturgy. They require no belief, only muscle memory and adherence to the technical specifications of violence. Vincent spares a fleeting, almost clinical thought for Butch's gold watch. The man's frantic attachment to that relic of inherited trauma underscores the difference between them. Butch clung to a physical token of the past. Vincent chooses to carry only the immediate requirements of the present mission. That watch, Vincent thinks, is a tether, a vulnerability that could be exploited. His own lack of sentimental baggage is his greatest defense. He is lightweight, highly mobile, and leaves no emotional wreckage behind that Marcellus's enemies could use for leverage. A wave of profound, almost spiritual exhaustion washes over him. Not the weariness of a good night's sleep missed, but the accumulated fatigue of maintaining a perfect performance for years. It's the exhaustion of never being able to relax the muscles around his mouth, never allowing the eyes to genuinely drift off course. He fights it by focusing intensely on the truck ahead, a rusted-out pickup pulling an overloaded trailer. He analyzes its weaknesses, worn tires, perhaps an unstable load. It is a non-threat, but analyzing it keeps the core of his attention tethered to the tangible and observable. He pulls a specialized, heavy-duty flashlight from the glove compartment, not for darkness, but because it feels substantial, an extension of his own controlled force. It is a tool, like his gun, or the adrenaline shot he administered. Everything in his possession must have a practical, immediate purpose. The absence of Jules beside him leaves a hollow in the car, but Vincent translates that hollowness into operational space. More room for necessary gear, quieter contemplation, and fewer dissenting opinions. He is perfectly prepared to complete the next act alone, embodying the absolute reliability that Marcellus prizes above all else. The journey is long, but for Vincent Vega, the destination is irrelevant. Only the flawless execution of the transit matters. Quentin Tarantino's 1994 masterpiece, Pulp Fiction, remains a cultural touchstone, not merely for its stylized violence or razor-sharp dialogue, but for its masterful deconstruction of narrative structure. The film operates like a perfectly calibrated Swiss watch, where each seemingly disparate anecdote clicks into place, forming a mosaic that transcends simple chronology. It's a cinematic statement on chance, redemption, and the mundane horror lurking beneath the surface of cool. The film's brilliance lies fundamentally in its fractured timeline. By presenting the stories of Vincent Vega, Jules Winfield, Butch Coolidge, and the enigmatic briefcase out of sequence, Tarantino forces the audience to engage actively, assembling the puzzle pieces. The aftermath of the diner scene, the morning after the overdose, the impending confrontation, into a cohesive whole. This non-linearity mirrors the way memory functions, emphasizing the cyclical nature of the characters' lives where violence and philosophy constantly intersect. Vincent Vega, portrayed by John Travolta, is central to this exploration of existential malaise within the criminal underworld. Travolta's career, having previously peaked with Saturday Night Fever in Greece, was arguably resuscitated by this role. Vincent embodies a kind of detached professional cool, yet he is constantly failing upwards or downwards, depending on the scene. His date with Mia Wallace, Uma Thurman's icy muse, is a masterclass in manufactured tension, blending surreal culinary descriptions with the omnipresent threat of death. Epitomized by the adrenaline shot scene, a perfect encapsulation of the film's dark comedic rhythm. Tarantino, drawing deeply from French New Wave cinema and obscure exploitation films, positions these characters not as hardened gangsters, but as flawed employees on a very dangerous payroll. Jules Winfield, Samuel L. Jackson's career-defining role, provides the film's quasi-spiritual core. Jules's transition, triggered by the miraculous survival of the botched hit, is where the film's philosophical undercurrents bubble to the surface. His recitation of Ezekiel 25:17 is not a mere piece of trivia. It's a declaration of intent that evolves. Initially, it is a curse delivered with lethal authority. By the end, it becomes a potential path toward righteous living, even if that path remains uncertain. Jackson, whose earlier roles often relied on intense energy, here balances ferocious intensity with moments of profound reflection. The parallel narrative involving Butch Coolidge, the aging boxer played by Bruce Willis, introduces themes of misplaced honor and inescapable fate. Butch's decision to betray Marcellus Wallace, played by Ving Rhames, is driven by a simple human greed: the watch. This obsession with the heirloom, a connection to his dying father, grounds the otherwise hyper-stylized violence in tangible, almost sentimental value. The sequence in the pawn shop, descending into a surreal nightmare involving Zed and Maynard, is perhaps the film's most shocking deviation, an intentional immersion into pure cinematic transgression that tests the limits of audience allegiance and reveals the raw barbarism underpinning the cool veneer of Los Angeles crime. Tarantino's dialogue is the true star. It is verbose, meandering, and utterly captivating, often distracting from the impending violence. Conversations about European McDonald's menus or foot massages serve to humanize these killers just enough so that their brutality stings more profoundly when it arrives. The film doesn't just tell a story, it luxuriates in the atmosphere, using carefully curated soundtrack choices from surf rock to soul to provide an emotional shorthand that often contrasts sharply with the on-screen action. Pulp Fiction succeeds because it honors its influences: Elmore Leonard's sharp crime prose, Godard's formal experimentation, while forging something entirely new. A postmodern crime epic where redemption might be accidental, cool is mandatory, and every seemingly trivial conversation could be the last. The texture of the film is further enriched by the subtle performances surrounding the main trio. Uma Thurman's Mia Wallace, despite her limited screen time, casts a long shadow. She embodies the ultimate femme fatale, yet one tethered to a powerful unseen boss, Marcellus Wallace. Her fragility during the overdose scene, the moment where the film's stylized detachment completely shatters, reveals the vulnerability beneath the impenetrable veneer of Hollywood glamour. Tarantino uses these moments of crisis not for cheap scares, but as turning points that redefine the characters' trajectories. Mia's almost catatonic state, juxtaposed with Vincent's frantic, desperate actions, highlights the high stakes of their environment, a world where a misplaced needle can equal a death sentence. Marcellus Wallace himself, though rarely seen in full context, functions as the immovable object around which the entire ecosystem revolves. His presence is felt through fear and reputation. Ving Rhames portrays him not as a mustache-twirling villain, but as a calculating figure whose anger is methodical. His relationship dynamics, particularly the ambiguous scene with Butch in the back of the car, speak volumes about the hierarchies and unspoken rules of their criminal society, rules that Butch ultimately tries, and temporarily fails, to respect. The structural integrity of the film also relies on the repeated appearance of minor characters who gain significance through their placement in the timeline. Consider Lance, played by Eric Stoltz, Vincent's hapless drug dealer contact. Lance is pure, panicked incompetence, a perfect foil to Vincent's forced professionalism. Their frantic attempt to resuscitate Mia underscores Tarantino's genius for taking the most absurd situations, an adrenaline shot directly into the heart, and rendering them with terrifying, visceral realism. These side characters ground the hyper-stylized action in a recognizable reality of low-level hustlers caught in over their heads. Furthermore, the recurring motif of the briefcase remains a potent, deliberate enigma. Its contents are never shown, robbing the audience of easy answers and forcing them to focus instead on the meaning of the object to the characters. Is it glowing gold, diamonds, or something entirely mundane? The mystery elevates the stakes. The object symbolizes pure, unadulterated criminal value, the object of desire that motivates all the risk. When Jules and Vincent are discussing whether to open it, they are debating the very nature of temptation and the pursuit of illicit wealth, a debate immediately rendered meaningless by the timely arrival of the divine intervention survivors. The entire endeavor of Pulp Fiction is a meditation on cool versus consequence. The characters spend so much time cultivating an image, the sharp suits, the philosophical banter, the controlled demeanor, only to have chance, fate, or a moment of panic violently strip that facade away. Butch, the man who chooses money over loyalty, finds himself in a situation so profoundly humiliating and base that his only escape is a sudden, inexplicable act of chivalry towards his enemy, Marcellus. This moment of shared terror transcends the boxing match and the stolen cash. It's a primal bond forged in the abyss, suggesting that even in the most corrupted lives, there are irreducible moral cores that can surface under extreme pressure. Tarantino proves that narratives are not about neatly wrapped endings, but about the messy, unpredictable evolution of character moments strung together by fate's cruel string. The film's emotional resonance, often buried beneath layers of irony and dark humor, stems from the character's desperate yearning for meaning in a meaningless existence. Consider the scene where Jules and Vincent discuss the subtle differences between the metric and imperial systems while hauling a corpse. This mundane conversation, set against a backdrop of extreme transgression, encapsulates the character's fundamental detachment. They are creatures of habit and dialogue, using endless chatter as a defense mechanism against the sheer horror of their daily work. Vincent, in particular, seems perpetually exhausted by the pretense, his worldview colored by the casual observation that killing someone is just another entry on the to-do list. Mia Wallace's brief but impactful appearance in Jack Rabbit Slim's restaurant showcases Tarantino's meticulous world-building. The setting itself, a pastiche of idealized 1950s Americana populated by living icons like Marilyn Monroe and James Dean, is a critique of manufactured nostalgia. Mia, operating within this synthetic environment, is fiercely intelligent yet trapped by her association with Marcellus. Her dance with Vincent, the twist competition, is less about genuine enjoyment and more about asserting control and demonstrating cultural fluency within their closed society. It is a high-wire act of coolness that nearly collapses when Vincent mistakenly thinks she has overdosed, illustrating how easily their carefully constructed identities can shatter. The theme of redemption, primarily carried by Jules, is fascinatingly incomplete. When Jules declares his intention to retire from the life, it is not presented as a grand, triumphant decision, but as a nervous, perhaps temporary, pivot. His desire to walk the earth like the biblical figure he quotes suggests a profound shift. Yet the film wisely leaves the audience hanging. He still carries the gun. He still has to face the consequences of his past actions. And his future peace is predicated on the shaky, unproven faith derived from a near-death experience. This ambiguity makes Jules far more human than a clean conversion story would allow. His relationship with Vincent during their final moments together, a mixture of camaraderie forged in blood and mutual professional respect, highlights the genuine bonds that can form even among people dedicated to immoral enterprises. Butch's narrative arc is a study in stubborn masculinity and unexpected heroism. His motivation, the gold watch, is profoundly personal, a tangible link to a history that transcends the fleeting transactions of the criminal world. When he flees after beating Marcellus's fighter, his flight path is not calculated, it is pure panic. The sequence in the pawn shop, where he and Marcellus are captured, strips both men bare. In that dark, fetid space, their power dynamics dissolve into shared primal fear. Butcher's decision to save Marcellus from Zed is an act of self-preservation, certainly, but also a tacit acknowledgement that there are lines, even in criminal society, that should not be crossed. When Marcellus allows him to leave with the condition that he never speak of what happened, it is a conditional freedom, emphasizing that even escape from one's life narrative requires striking a new, unspoken bargain. Ultimately, Pulp Fiction functions as a vibrant, kinetic tapestry of American subculture viewed through a fractured pop art lens. Tarantino filters the harsh realities of crime through the lens of cool, employing anachronistic music and dialogue that elevates the everyday into the mythic. The film's enduring power lies not just in its shock value, but in its intricate structure, which rewards endless rewatching, revealing new connections and emotional nuances each time the fractured pieces are reassembled. It is a film that understands that life, much like a compelling story, rarely moves in a straight line. The genius of Tarantino's script also lies in how he utilizes objects and spaces to anchor the film's philosophical musings. The apartment where Jules and Vincent retrieve the briefcase is the initial crucible, a contained space overflowing with dread and the smell of stale cigarettes and impending doom. The transformation of that room, from a site of bloody execution to the place where Jules contemplates abandoning violence, mirrors the thematic transition the entire movie undergoes. The setting ceases to be merely a location. It becomes an active participant in the character's moral calculus. This emphasis on environmental detail extends to the lingering visual language of the film. The cinematography, often employing dynamic tracking shots and sharp zooms, captures the characters in perpetual motion, even when they are stationary, suggesting an inescapable momentum driving them toward their fates. The constant visual energy prevents the audience from settling into complacency, mirroring the precarious lives the characters lead where one wrong move, a forgotten briefcase, a slight hesitation in pulling the trigger, can lead to complete derailment. Consider the role of food and drink as signifiers of character and culture within this stylized milieu. The Big Kahuna Burger, the $5 milkshake, the discussion of European fast food. These details are meticulously deployed. They serve as markers of a specific slightly off-kilter reality. Characters who are capable of unimaginable brutality are often preoccupied with the quality of their consumables, highlighting a deep-seated desire for simple, tangible pleasures amidst moral decay. This juxtaposition is a cornerstone of Tarantino's appeal, the elevation of the trivial to the level of high drama. The recurring motif of communication breakdown and misinterpretation also underpins the narrative tension. Vincent misunderstands Mia's request, leading to the near-fatal overdose. Butch misunderstands the rules of the fight, leading to his initial flight. Jules and Vincent communicate through a highly coded, often abstract language that serves to distance them from the real-world implications of their actions. The film suggests that the constant noise, the constant talking, is necessary precisely because the reality they inhabit is too horrifying to face in silence. They talk to fill the void where a moral compass should be. Even the final scene in the diner, tying together the loose ends from the opening sequence, is orchestrated with deliberate theatricality. Yolanda and Pumpkin, the petty thieves who initiate the film's chaotic trajectory, are unexpectedly confronted by the seemingly reformed Jules. This meeting isn't about narrative closure. It's about Jules testing his newfound resolve against the immediate temptation of violence. By choosing dialogue over bloodshed, Jules offers a genuine, albeit shaky, demonstration of his transformation. He returns the briefcase, relinquishing the object that once symbolized pure temptation, and walks away, leaving the audience with the powerful impression that salvation, when it comes in the grime and neon of this world, is often less a miracle and more a terrifying, deliberate choice made in the eye of a storm. Pulp Fiction remains a towering achievement because it treats the messy business of becoming human with the same intense focus it affords a spectacular shootout. The film's dedication to the texture of cool is intrinsically linked to its use of music. The soundtrack is not background accompaniment. It is an active narrator, setting moods and often ironically commenting on the action unfolding. Dick Dale's frantic surf rock during the adrenaline shot scene elevates the moment from a medical emergency to a seismic event, infusing sterile action with raw, untamed energy. Similarly, the smooth, melancholic soul tracks underscore moments of reflection or anticipated romance, creating a bittersweet counterpoint to the character's nihilistic existence. Tarantino, deeply influenced by his time working in a video store, curated these obscure and familiar tracks to create an immediate, recognizable atmosphere. A mixtape of cultural references that instantly immerses the viewer in his self-created cinematic universe. The power dynamics surrounding Mia Wallace are particularly revealing about the ecosystem Marcellus controls. Mia is defined entirely by her relationship to him. She is his prized possession, capable of great allure, but entirely subservient to his invisible authority. When Vincent hesitates during their date, worried about Marcellus's potential wrath over a misplaced kiss or a casual comment, it illustrates that the true menace in this world isn't the street-level violence, but the silent, institutional power wielded by figures like Wallace. Vincent's fear of Marcellus eclipses his fear of death itself, highlighting a social structure where reputation and unspoken boundaries are the ultimate currency. The relationship between Jules and Vincent, however, is the emotional anchor of the film's middle act. Despite their shared profession, they possess fundamentally different outlooks. Vincent is the tired cynic, comfortable in the routine of amorality, while Jules is the restless seeker, perhaps secretly yearning for an exit ramp. Their banter about European customs or the merits of a good diner reveals a profound human need for connection, even if that connection is limited to discussing mundane topics while transporting a dead body in the back seat of a car. This shared, darkly comedic familiarity is what makes Jules's eventual decision to leave so impactful. He is abandoning not just a job, but his most consistent human relationship. Butcher's storyline introduces a jarring element of primal reality into the hyper-stylized gangster world. His escape through the city after the boxing match is chaotic and desperate, a stark contrast to the choreographed precision of Vincent and Jules's missions. The pawn shop sequence, where he and Marcellus are subdued, functions as a deliberate shockwave intended to reset the narrative's moral compass. By forcing Butch, the man driven by greed and self-interest, into the role of temporary savior, Tarantino momentarily suspends the established rules of engagement. The shared trauma strips away the bravado, revealing a shared animal instinct for survival that temporarily binds the victim and the perpetrator together against a greater, more grotesque threat. This moment is not about redemption in the spiritual sense, but about an immediate, visceral understanding of a shared vulnerability. Ultimately, The film's brilliance resides in its commitment to the idea that identity is performance, and that in the postmodern landscape Tarantino constructs, even the most violent individuals are susceptible to moments of profound, unscripted humanity or baffling coincidence. The narrative structure itself suggests that life doesn't follow cause and effect in a clean line. Rather, the significant moments, the miracle, the near-fatal overdose, the robbery turned spiritual reckoning, are scattered randomly, forcing the characters to constantly re-evaluate who they are based on the last unpredicted event. The enduring fascination with Pulp Fiction is also rooted in how effortlessly it blends the lowbrow with the philosophical. Tarantino treats the transactional nature of criminal life with the same gravity as he treats existential crises. This is evident in the dialogue surrounding the mystery of the briefcase. The contents remain deliberately abstract because the object itself functions as a MacGuffin of pure motivation. It is the shimmering, unseen prize that justifies the inherent risk. The soft golden light rumored to emanate from it during its rare appearances hints at something transcendent, perhaps representing the elusive nature of true reward or divine favor that Jules seeks. The character's obsession with what is inside mirrors humanity's own ceaseless quest for ultimate meaning or wealth, even when the reality proves anticlimactic. Vincent Vega's journey is characterized by a pervasive sense of being slightly out of sync with his own life. Travolta plays him with a weary resignation, the kind of man who executes a complex plan flawlessly, only to immediately forget why he did it. His interactions with Mia are infused with a tension born of professional protocol, colliding with basic human attraction. He navigates the dangerous dance with the awareness that any misstep, a too long stare, a slight deviation from the script, could result in his immediate termination by Marcellus. Vincent's eventual death, occurring early in the timeline but revealed late in the film's structure, serves as a crucial piece of dramatic irony. The audience knows the outcome, which colors his seemingly mundane tasks, like fetching food or engaging in small talk, with a tragic inevitability. The brilliance of the film's characterization extends to the minor players who briefly inhabit the foreground before receding back into the background noise of the criminal city. Marvin, the unfortunate soul who gets violently splattered in the car, represents the ultimate collateral damage. His sudden, gruesome demise, which forces Vincent and Jules into damage control with the wolf, highlights the bureaucratic, almost tedious aftermath of sudden, messy violence. Harvey Keitel's wolf is the picture of unflappable professional efficiency, contrasting sharply with the panic of the hitmen. He is the fixer, the symbol of the necessary infrastructure that cleans up the messes created by grander, more philosophical criminals. The film's pacing is a masterclass in expectation management. Scenes are drawn out until the audience is practically vibrating with anticipation, only for the tension to be released through a sudden shift in subject matter or a burst of dark comedy. The seemingly endless drive to the apartment, punctuated by Vincent's commentary, is a prime example. This methodical approach ensures that when actual violence erupts, it feels earned, brutal, and rarely gratuitous in the narrative sense, because the film has spent so much time cultivating the psychological space leading up to it. Jules's ultimate departure is the film's most resonant emotional beat because it suggests that transcendence is available even to those deeply mired in filth. His act of choosing mercy over the easy execution of Pumpkin and Yolanda in the diner is not driven by logic or professional mandate, but by a deep internal shift. He uses the very scripture he once wielded as a threat to broker peace. He has walked through the fire of the near miss, and rather than becoming hardened, he emerges with a cautious, provisional sense of grace. His final walk out of the diner, leaving the glowing briefcase behind, the temptation relinquished, is the film's quiet, deeply satisfying punctuation mark on the idea that breaking the cycle requires a deliberate choice to abandon what one has been trained to value most. The aesthetic layering of Pulp Fiction is deeply indebted to Tarantino's love affair with cinema history. An homage expressed not through simple pastiche, but through vibrant reinvention. The film borrows the terse, cool fatalism of hard-boiled crime fiction, particularly the works of Elmore Leonard, where conversations about trivialities provide cover for inherently dangerous transactions. Yet Tarantino injects a level of self-awareness and theatricality that elevates the genre material into something distinctly modern and self-referential. The stylized gunfights and slick dialogue are designed to feel both familiar and jarringly new, playing on the audience's cinematic literacy. The structure itself, cycling back upon itself, ensures that the audience is constantly re-evaluating earlier scenes with new information. For instance, watching Vincent and Jules discuss the job at the beginning, knowing Jules's eventual crisis of faith, colors their actions with a sense of dramatic irony. Conversely, seeing Vincent's demise after Mia's overdose, only to realize this event occurred before Jules's spiritual awakening, emphasizes the fragmented, non-linear nature of fate in their world. Time is pliable, consequence is malleable, but style is eternal. The characterization of Butch Coolidge offers a unique window into the limitations of the criminal code. Butch is not a philosopher or a poet. He is a professional operating on instinct and self-interest. His decision to keep the watch rather than immediately selling it betrays a deep, almost sentimental attachment to lineage that contrasts sharply with the purely mercenary motivations of Marcellus's world. When he is forced to confront the absolute depths of degradation in the pawnshop, the veneer of the tough boxer dissolves. His temporary alliance with Marcellus is born not of respect, but of shared, terrifying proximity to oblivion. This sequence is crucial because it demonstrates that, stripped of reputation and social standing, all men revert to a basic, survivalist morality, however temporary that alliance may be. Moreover, the film expertly handles the concept of cool as a form of social armor. Vincent and Jules are constantly performing their roles. Their exaggerated demeanor, their specialized vocabulary, and their deliberate pacing are all mechanisms to maintain control in inherently uncontrollable circumstances. When that control slips, when Vincent can't handle Mia's emergency, or when the hit on Brett goes south, the performance breaks, revealing the underlying panic and incompetence. This fragile nature of cool is perhaps the film's most insightful commentary on modern celebrity and criminal posturing. It is a costume easily shed under pressure. In the end, Pulp Fiction succeeds not just because of its shocking moments or quotable lines, but because it commits fully to its own internal logic, however absurd. It is a film about crossroads, where characters repeatedly stand at the junction of their old ways and a potential, frighteningly uncertain new path. The glowing briefcase, the saved life, the walked-away fight. These are not neat resolutions, but abrupt stops on a very long, bizarre road trip, leaving the audience with the unsettling recognition that meaning, like a cool anecdote, must be actively assembled by the observer. The pervasive sense of urban alienation, which permeates every frame, is amplified by the film's distinctive visual palette. A mix of harsh neon, smoke-filled interiors, and the sun-bleached sterility of Los Angeles homes. This world feels both hyper-real and deliberately artificial, like a highly curated museum exhibit of criminal subculture. The grime is stylized. The violence, while shocking, is often framed with an almost painterly composition. This dual nature, grounded in recognizable criminal archetypes, yet operating on dream logic, is essential to the film's unique emotional texture. We are invited to observe these morally compromised lives without being entirely absorbed by them, thanks to the constant ironic distance provided by the dialogue. The dynamic between Jules and Vincent during their early morning cleanup operation, following the unintentional shooting of Brett, showcases their distinct professional styles, colliding with the mundane inconvenience of mortal mess. Vincent, pragmatic, and focused on adhering to Marcellus's implied instructions, treats the situation as a logistical nightmare. How to dispose of the evidence efficiently. Jules, however, is already processing the event through a new, quasi-religious filter. His initial attempts to rationalize the near-death experience back to Vincent using statistical probability fall flat. Vincent prefers comfortable cynicism over uncomfortable revelation. This contrast highlights the difficulty of genuine transformation within a rigid social structure. Jules is reaching for salvation, while Vincent is preoccupied with the immediate threat posed by the wolf's potential disapproval. The film subtly explores themes of domesticity and the impossibility of normal life for these characters. Vincent's interactions, whether with Mia or with his dealer Lance, reveal a man perpetually out of place in any situation that doesn't involve an immediate threat or assignment. His quiet awkwardness around Mia, rooted in his fear of Marcellus, suggests a deep-seated desire for normalcy, a desire that his profession actively sabotages. He can manage a high-stakes hit, but cannot navigate the simple complexities of a dinner date without risking his life. This fragility of composure is what makes his eventual, random death feel so poignant. He wasn't felled by a grand enemy, but by a petty thief in a diner, an utterly uncool, ignominious end befitting a man who lived his life on borrowed time. The psychological toll taken on Butch is perhaps the most visceral, especially in the aftermath of the pawnshop ordeal. His escape is not triumphant. It is frantic, characterized by the adrenaline of pure terror. When Marcellus allows him to leave, the unspoken agreement, never to speak of the horror endured, is a heavy burden. Butch is not redeemed. He is merely permitted to continue existing under a new, unspoken contract of silence. His future will be haunted by that basement, a memory far more powerful than any money he earns. This illustrates that in Tarantino's world, escaping violence often means trading one form of confinement for another, a quiet, perpetual fear in exchange for physical freedom. Pulp Fiction ultimately achieves its lasting impact by refusing to resolve its characters neatly. It presents vignettes of extreme experience, miracles, betrayals, acts of base terror, and allows the characters to react, change, or remain stubbornly the same. The film champions the idea that life's most meaningful moments are often interruptions, accidents that derail the planned trajectory. By sequencing these disruptions seemingly at random, Tarantino argues that perception, the assembly of fragmented moments into a coherent story, is the only true act of creation available to his characters and, by extension, to the viewer. The intentional ambiguity surrounding the glow of the briefcase acts as a narrative mirror, reflecting the internal state of the characters who obsess over it. For Jules and Vincent initially, it represents the tangible reward for their professional compliance, the concrete proof of their success in a world devoid of inherent meaning. When Jules later rejects the monetary value symbolized by the case, relinquishing it to Pumpkin, he is actively choosing the intangible over the tangible. He is trading the possibility of immediate wealth for the chance at spiritual peace. This thematic shift, enacted through an inanimate object, is what makes the scene so profoundly effective. It's a definitive symbolic rejection of the criminal lifeblood that had sustained them. The concept of reputation versus reality is constantly played out through the characters' speech patterns. They utilize verbose, almost academic language to discuss the most barbaric subjects, creating a protective shell of intellectualism around brutal behavior. This heightened dialogue, influenced by Tarantino's deep appreciation for obscure cinema and literary sources, functions as a barrier against genuine introspection. Vincent, for instance, can articulate complex theories on European dining etiquette while simultaneously being utterly unprepared to handle a medical emergency. His proficiency lies entirely within the script of his criminal persona, not in actual crisis management. Mia Wallace, though ephemeral, embodies the dangerous allure of the untouchable icon within this ecosystem. Her near-death experience is the single most destabilizing event for Vincent, forcing him outside his routine and into raw, unscripted panic. The urgency of reviving her, using the antiquated but visceral technique of the adrenaline shot, signifies a moment where pure, desperate action bypasses all the carefully constructed cool. It is a necessary, ugly intrusion of reality into their highly polished fantasy life, and its successful resolution allows the performance of coolness to resume, albeit slightly scarred. Butch's arc, while seeming straightforwardly about survival and theft, is actually about the messy, unforgiving nature of personal history. The gold watch is not just valuable, it represents a continuity, a connection to a father figure that Marcellus, in his own way, understands through his command over the criminal hierarchy. When Butch returns for the watch, he willingly steps back into the danger zone, proving that some personal codes outweigh sheer expediency. His moment of chivalry in the pawnshop, saving Marcellus from Zed, is not a sudden moral conversion, but a recognition of a deeper, unspoken law. Even among enemies, there are certain levels of degradation that violate the established, albeit dark, societal contract. Marcellus's tacit forgiveness is terrifying because it is conditional, built upon shared trauma and the knowledge of what Butch has seen. Tarantino masterfully uses the non-chronological arrangement to suggest that causality is often misleading. We witness the consequences before we see the full setup, making the audience work to find the logical thread. This formal strategy reinforces the film's thematic point. Life doesn't unfold neatly. Instead, major life shifts, the miracle, the near-death experiences, the career-ending mistakes, happen seemingly at random, forcing the characters to constantly retrofit their understanding of their own narratives in the wake of chaos. The film is less a story about gangsters and more a study of individuals desperately trying to impose order, via dialogue and style, onto a fundamentally chaotic existence. The interplay between extreme violence and detached, almost academic discourse is Pulp Fiction's most consistent stylistic signature. This tonal dissonance is crucial. It prevents the film from settling into either a straightforward crime thriller or a purely comedic endeavor. Instead, the characters inhabit a space where existential dread is processed through trivia. When Jules and Vincent discuss the subtle differences between a foot massage being a capital offense versus a mere transgression, they are engaging in a form of emotional dissociation. The language becomes the shield, a complex mechanism designed to keep the visceral reality of their profession at an arm's length. This verbal agility is their primary form of control, far more reliable than any weapon. The brief, intense romance between Vincent and Mia, framed entirely within the artificial landscape of Jack Rabbit Slims, is a perfect study in constrained desire. They are dancing on a razor's edge, acutely aware that their interaction is observed and judged by the unseen power of Marcellus. Their attempt to recreate an idealized, nostalgic moment, the twist competition, is simultaneously an assertion of their own temporary freedom and a demonstration of their adherence to a specific, performative coolness. Mia's subsequent collapse pulls Vincent out of this fantasy and into a direct, primal fight for survival, proving that even the most controlled environments are susceptible to catastrophic failure. This scene functions as a necessary decompression before the film thrusts the audience into the even darker, more primal territory of Butch's storyline. Butch's narrative interruption serves a vital structural purpose. It introduces a set of rules entirely different from those governing Marcellus's enforcers. Butch operates on a more straightforward, albeit self-serving, code of honor, defined by money and personal legacy, the watch. When he encounters the absolute nadir of degradation in the pawnshop, the established hierarchy of crime collapses, Zed and Maynard represent a form of lawlessness that even Marcellus, the kingpin, seems to fear, or at least meticulously avoid. Butch's decision to save Marcellus is not about friendship. It is a transactional morality born from mutual terror. By saving the man who wants him dead, Butch purchases his own immediate safety, and more profoundly, earns a temporary exemption from the established order, a freedom contingent on his silence regarding the unspeakable acts committed in that basement. The recurring motif of chance, or perhaps fate, is most elegantly handled through the ending of Jules's arc. His decision in the diner to leave the case is not a grand, heroic gesture, but a quiet, almost awkward renunciation. He diffuses the situation with words, utilizing his acquired philosophy rather than the violence he has always relied upon. This suggests that true change isn't marked by spectacular acts, but by the consistent, mundane choices made under pressure. Jules walks away from the glowing mystery, accepting an unknown future over a terrifyingly familiar one. The film leaves the audience understanding that while the lives of Vincent and Butch are defined by fatalistic action, Jules's life is redefined by a single, deliberate act of pacifism, offering a faint but persistent glimmer of hope within the film's otherwise cynical landscape. The very fabric of the film's dialogue acts as a deliberate obfuscation, a way for these characters to avoid confronting the emptiness of their pursuits. Tarantino elevates the commonplace. Fast food preferences, foot rubs, the nuances of European cigarette brands, to the level of high drama, precisely because the truly dramatic elements, murder, betrayal, existential dread, are too heavy to discuss plainly. This constant stream of tangential conversation creates an atmosphere thick with performative nonchalance. Vincent Vega, in particular, is a master of this performance. His coolness a carefully maintained facade that occasionally cracks under stress, revealing a deeply ordinary man trapped in an extraordinary, deadly profession. His reliance on routine is almost heartbreaking. He seeks comfort in the familiar rituals of his job, unable to formulate a genuine life outside of Marcellus Wallace's shadow. The relationship between Mia and Vincent is a study in transactional intimacy under surveillance. Mia, embodying a kind of detached glamour, exists in a state of perpetual performance within Marcellus's sphere of influence. Her flirtation with Vincent is less about genuine connection and more about testing the boundaries of her own power within the system that confines her. When Vincent administers the adrenaline shot, the scene is jarringly intimate, a desperate, messy act of resuscitation that shatters the cool aesthetic of their previous interactions. It's a moment where artifice breaks down, revealing the sheer fragility of life when disconnected from professional veneer. The subsequent return to normalcy, the casual drive to the diner, speaks volumes about their world's capacity to swiftly absorb and neutralize catastrophe. Butch's narrative thread is the film's most potent statement on the limitations of greed. His obsession with the gold watch, a relic of his father, a tangible piece of personal history, compels him to return to the scene of his betrayal. This sentimental attachment clashes violently with the purely economic motivations driving Marcellus Wallace. The ensuing confrontation in the pawnshop basement plunges the narrative into the grotesque, a temporary descent into pure horror, where societal rules cease to function. In this space, the hierarchy of the criminal underworld dissolves. Butch saves Marcellus not out of sudden friendship, but because the alternative, allowing a violation of primal dignity, is somehow worse than death. This moment of shared, abject humiliation for both men redefines their relationship from simple antagonism to one based on mutual, terrifying acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. Jules's transformation is predicated on accepting randomness. He initially seeks order in the divine pronouncements of Ezekiel 25:17, attempting to fit human brutality into a predetermined divine plan. The miracle, however, shatters that neat theological box, forcing him to realize that grace might be arbitrary, unearned, and deeply inconvenient. His final confrontation with Pumpkin and Yolanda is the practical test of this new worldview. He doesn't preach. He negotiates. He walks away from the briefcase, the ultimate symbol of the life he is leaving, not with fanfare, but with a weary, profound acceptance that the path forward is unknown. This is not a story about becoming a saint, but about an exhausted man choosing to stop walking down a path that guarantees misery, even if the alternative is terrifyingly blank. The film ensures that the audience leaves with the lingering sense that true salvation isn't a loud explosion, but a quiet, difficult decision made over breakfast. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Q-Man channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. Today, we're going to be discussing the 1994 film Pulp Fiction. The air in Los Angeles hangs thick with the scent of cheap cigarettes and existential dread. A familiar perfume for the characters who drift through Quentin Tarantino's sprawling tapestry of crime and conversation. We first encounter Vincent Vega, a man whose coolness borders on apathy, though beneath the surface one senses the quiet competency of a seasoned enforcer, perhaps someone who learned the hard lessons of loyalty and violence early on in the criminal underbelly. He's currently paired with Jules Winfield, whose religious epiphanies seem as sudden and shocking as the rounds he fires. Their morning task, retrieving a mysterious briefcase for their boss, Marcellus Wallace, is a masterclass in dramatic tension, punctuated by a philosophical debate about the subtleties of European fast food, a telling detail about their inner lives, contrasting the banal with the brutally swift application of force. The narrative splices swiftly, pulling us back to earlier moments. We see Vincent navigating a far more delicate assignment, escorting Marcellus's dangerously alluring wife, Mia Wallace. Mia, whose brief but unforgettable stint as a television actress, a fleeting brush with manufactured stardom, now makes her presence in the underworld that much more volatile. Vincent, aware of the cardinal rule against touching the boss's woman, moves with the nervous energy of someone who has seen colleagues disappear for far less transgression. Their evening, a trip to Jack Rabbit Slim's, a meticulously crafted, nostalgic pastiche of 1950s Americana, becomes a stage for awkward dancing and near disaster when Mia accidentally overdoses on heroin, mistaking it for cocaine. Vincent's frantic drive to Marcellus's personal doctor, an almost farcical sequence demanding an adrenaline shot directly into the heart, illustrates the razor's edge these people walk. One wrong move and the consequences are immediate and terminal. Juxtaposed with these dangerous errands is the story of Butch Coolidge, a washed-up boxer whose career was effectively bought and sold by Marcellus Wallace. Butch, haunted by the memory of his father's gold watch, a symbol of generational trauma and survival passed down through unimaginable hardship, decides to betray the fix. He wins the fight but escapes with the payoff, setting in motion a chain of events that collide violently with the lives of Vincent and Marcellus. His frantic escape on a motorcycle, borrowing a distinctive chopper from an acquaintance, highlights the sheer chaos of trying to outrun fate in this city. The lives converge unexpectedly in a pawn shop. Butch, needing to retrieve the heirloom watch, runs directly into Vincent Vega, who is purchasing a new wardrobe. The resulting, shockingly casual gunfight ends Vincent's narrative arc abruptly, a stark reminder of the unpredictability of this world. Butch, in a moment of supreme, almost mythic irony, accidentally runs over Marcellus Wallace while fleeing the scene. Both men, injured and terrified, seek refuge in the dimly lit, fetid interior of a specialized antique shop, only to fall into the hands of Maynard, a sadistic character whose predilections lead to a truly nightmarish scenario in the basement. Butch, summoning the raw, fighting instinct that made him a boxer, rescues Marcellus, and in a spontaneous display of loyalty, born from shared terror, they agree to let each other go, a truce sealed in the shadow of profound depravity. The timeline loops back once more to the opening scene, but now we see the aftermath of Jules's sudden spiritual awakening during the botched robbery attempt earlier that morning. Jules, convinced that the miraculous survival of himself and Vincent from a barrage of bullets was divine intervention, The Ezekiel 25:17 passage, recited not as a threat, but as a prophecy fulfilled, decides to leave the life. Vincent, ever the pragmatist, remains skeptical. They encounter the surviving robber, Pumpkin, now calling himself Ringo, who attempts to hold them up again. Jules, having already committed to his change of heart, calmly relinquishes the briefcase, effectively walking away from the material stakes of their profession. He leaves Ringo and his partner with a small amount of money, a symbolic gesture of casting off the darkness. The film closes as Vincent, having survived the night, drives Jules to a diner where they share a simple breakfast, coffee and toast. Jules departs to begin his new path, leaving Vincent alone, a man still deeply embedded in the machinery of Marcellus's empire, yet perhaps subtly altered by the whirlwind of violence, love triangles, and existential crises he has just navigated. It's a messy ending, characteristic of the film's design. Threads are tied, but the larger tapestry remains frayed, inviting the audience to endlessly re-examine the connections between these beautifully flawed souls. The diner scene, simple as it appears, functions as a fragile punctuation mark on a night defined by excess and near-death experiences. Vincent Vega, chewing his toast with a weary indifference that has become his signature pose, watches Jules embrace a new, uncertain future. Vincent, a man molded by the very structure he serves, the loyalty to Marcellus Wallace defining his every move, from accepting the most bizarre requests to maintaining a facade of unflappable cool, cannot easily shed the skin of the professional killer. He seems less capable of the grand epiphany Jules experienced. For Vincent, life remains a series of procedures, albeit ones that occasionally involve heart injections or clandestine meetings. His past, likely filled with the kind of necessary brutalities that earn one respect in this world, has left him fundamentally tethered to the cycle. Consider Mia Wallace again, emerging from the near-fatal overdose. Her allure isn't just physical,